Okay, so the next stage of consciousness is your individuated stage. Um, well, that's about 20%. Now, let me go back. That first stage that we talked about of consciousness is going to be, well, for those of you who may have started with this video, I'm Candy, and I'm going over the states of consciousness. And I'm also talking about how this plays into astrology and my mindscaping sessions that I do with people. And although this is not just solely based on the chart, this is the states of consciousness is more based on conversation and interviewing that I do with people when I'm talking to them to find out exactly where they are and what level they can operate on. And that first stage was the consensus stage, and we talked about, to recap, they're the worker bees, they're the ones who keep up with the Joneses, they're the ones who tell everybody what to do. They've mastered this consensus or the herd state world. That whole thing, be in the world, not of the world. They are the ones who are of the world, which is about 70% of the population. They, when the government moves, they move. When entertainment moves, they move. When education moves, they move. I mean, it's almost hard to keep up with them if you are more spiritually evolved. You feel like that they're going just way, way, way too fast, because these people really are in tune with the world. They have their finger on the pulse of what's going on, what's happening, and so that third stage, in the consensus stage, imagine that they are like the preacher and everybody else is like the member. Everybody else are the members in the church, so to speak. Like they're the leaders of that first stage of consciousness. Also, that stage of consciousness called consensus is ruled by the planet Saturn. Okay? Just for your information and for those who know a little bit about astrology. Well, our second group is ruled by the planet Uranus. They're called the individuated group. These individuals make up about 20% of the population. This is my ideal group. This is about where I was. I think I was born in this group because I never did quite click with traditional religions and things like that. Even as a kid, I had lots of questions and things like that. Always. It's even just observing before I could even speak good. I just remember observing things and wondering like why. So the individuated group, they start waking up. They remember a little bit more about who they were. They remember a little bit more about who they are in the bigger picture of things, okay? So when we're talking about them, we're talking about the group that they question the conditioning and they search for the freedom of believing the way that they feel like they want to believe things. If something doesn't really make sense, they don't mind saying, oh, that doesn't make sense. Let's look at that a little bit closer. Right? And if they look at it a little bit closer and they discover something, they're open to it. They're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Wow, that's amazing. This is the beginning of the awakened consciousness, that wanderlust. And if you notice, I get really excited when we talk about this group because this is my ideal group to work with. If you're in this group, when you feel yourself kind of pulling away from society, where you don't really feel like, where you almost feel like you were born in a different time, right? And I know a lot of people that say that they feel that way. Well, that's because you are awakened, right? But in this first stage of this second group, they are afraid of rocking the boat and breaking away from the status quo. They are afraid that their security is going to be threatened. They are afraid that they're going to be rejected, that they're not going to be accepted by society. This is the first part of it. So they wake up, they know something's different, but they don't really want to share it with people. I was at that place, I think, at about, I would say 15, where I really knew, okay, I like different stuff, and I can draw lots of information from different things. And I was very aware of how all things were connected, but I didn't quite know how. So I didn't really put it all together that early, but I did have a sense of what it was. Okay, now the second stage in the individuated consciousness, these people feel trapped, right? They feel like they are like almost like in a bad dream, so to speak. They are awake, but they're still functioning in this consensus world, where they feel like they're misunderstood a lot. They don't really know who they are, but they know who they are not. Okay. I hit this stage probably around 21. Okay. Now, when I speak of these stages, these are also astrological cycles that hit. So it's a cyclical thing that can go on if you allow it to happen. When you go through ages and cycles, because that's all life is, it's a cycle. Your consciousness naturally wants to evolve and wake up and do things, right? But when you're in a container of religion, education is the same way. When you're in a container, because have you ever noticed how people instinctively can learn things, and as soon as you put them in school, they shut down? Okay, they have an instinctual way of learning. If you put them outside in nature, they'll pick right up. If you let them count, something in the natural world, they'll pick up math. But as soon as you put them in school and get a book and contain them and try to mold them and shape them, and they shut down. Well, it's the same thing with religion. That when people are individuated, of individuated consciousness, they have a way of just feeling their way through. Like they kind of have a feeling this isn't right, or that's not right, or that's not quite right. And things kind of rub them the wrong way, and people look at them as being contrary. But in this second stage, they don't really know how to verbalize it. They just know what they're not. So it looks like rebellion to other people. Well, in this third stage, they know who they are, and they are becoming comfortable with that. They're able to objectify the things that are going on around them, and they're able to peacefully kind of mix beliefs, and they accept everybody else's belief system, and they're not quite as defensive. They get a spark of genius ideas, and they kind of break away from everything. I think I went through that individuated third stage around 30. To me, that's like the longest stage. I would say right around my Saturn return was when I could feel myself going in there, entering into that third stage of that second state of consciousness. Able to create your own security. That was around the time, I think around age 28, where I started actually doing astrology readings and things, and getting paid for it and started my own website, and people were asking. I was doing classes, and I mean, it was just amazing how things were just opening up in this avenue of things that I was just already very interested in. Um, you also expose distortions and reveal deeper truths around that time. So if you see something that's not right, you speak up about it and you give people something to think about, kind of shock people a little bit. Remember, this is Uranus based energy, and Uranus is all about shock value. It's all about genius ideas and flickers of light, and light bulbs going off, and things. So then once you get to that stage, the next stage that I'm going to go over with you all coming up is the spirituated stage, or the spiritual stage, which is ruled by Neptune. But that second stage, if you find yourself in that stage, you're my ideal client. That means that we can get in the floor, we can pull out all kinds of systems, we can talk about all kinds of things, we can make connections, we can figure out what it is that you no longer need and what it is that you do need, and create a whole just mindscaping journey for you. It's very exciting to be in that individuated stage, because that stage is where you are able to compare and contrast things that are going on. You experiment a lot in that stage. In the Bible it talks about test and proving. Prove me now herewith saith the Lord of hosts. You're supposed to test and prove things that are designed to bring you closer to your higher self. The more you test it, and the more you prove it, and the more it shows itself to you, the more it opens up, the more you grow, the more control you have, the more you learn what your own thing is, your superpower. We all have our own superpower. So you learn what your superpower is. I think that's a great way to say this. In the individuated stage, you're kind of playing with your powers. And you're like, okay, what's my superpower? What's my superpower? People in the individuated stage discover that they're healers. They discover that they're intuitives. They discover that they are able to pick up things very quickly and be teachers, and then they start studying independently to do these things. So if you're in the individuated stage, feel free to give me a call, look at some of my things, let me know if you want to learn more, go deeper and open up, because this third stage is where it gets really, really serious, and we're going to go into that coming up. Reconstruct the world by reconstructing your mind. I know you can do it. Bye.